Hey! Hi, Walida. How are you?
Hi. We made it.
You made it. Sorry, everybody who's watching. So there was a technical issue. My computer I had a ton of different screens open, and I started hearing myself in different galaxies, and so I kind of freaked out, and then and then I had to move us to a new link because we closed the old Hangout. Anyway, sometimes things like that happen when you're still learning how to use new technology. So, welcome, everybody who's watching and who will be watching whenever you're watching. My name is Jillian Walker. I am an artist in New York City, and I met Walida at a conference at Columbia University back in October, and just thought she was fantastic and wanted to talk to her more. We had a really long conversation after a talk she gave um, at this conference, and I wanted to talk to her more about radical sci-fi, about decolonizing the imagination, um, and just more about the importance of visionary fiction, imagining new worlds and new lives for ourselves and for our communities and for the global community. So thank you so much, Walida. Where are you right now?
I am in my house in Portland, Oregon.
I love it. I love all of your books. I'm
Thank
trying to see what you have back there, but I
I
can't
know.
read it.
Maybe I could do a tour later on of my bookshelf, my
Okay.
nerd toys that are also out.
Well, I'd love for, people who don't know you to know more about you. So just, anything that you want to say, I'd love for you to share.
Sure. So my name's Walidah Imarisha, and I'm a poet and a writer and an educator, sci-fi scholar, and I am co-editing a anthology of radical science fiction written by organizers and activists called Octavia's Brood Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements with my co-editor Adrienne Marie Brown. And we're very excited. It'll be out April 1st, 2015 on AK Press, so that is super exciting. And we've been working on this project for a number of years and have really just both been trying to delve deeper into what it means to engage in visionary organizing and the ways that science fiction and fantastical writing can actually help us build the new worlds that we want to see.
Hmm. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about how you ended up coming to visionary fiction and just share about your process and sort of coming to work like that?
Sure. So I've always been a nerd since the womb. My first memory is watching Star Trek, the episode "Who Mourns for Adonis" from the original series. If anyone remembers, it's not a great episode, but I wasn't a critic at that point. I was two. So I've always been a nerd. I've always been into this idea of fantastical landscapes. And then, when I became politicized, when I got involved in community organizing, radical politics, I sort of felt like I had to put that on the shelf and say, well, now I have to be serious, and I don't have time for this silliness. And luckily, thank God, I met people who were like, no, boo-boo, no, don't do that. And was able to kind of reconstruct myself as a whole person again. And so I started engaging around the idea of what we were calling visionary fiction, which is science fiction, speculative fiction, horror, magical realism, basically anything weird. If it's weird shit, that's us, visionary fiction. But that helps us envision new worlds, right? And helps us begin the process of building those new worlds today. And so I kind of created the term to separate it from mainstream science fiction, which most often reinforces dominant paradigms of exploitation, right? It's the one white dude who's saving the entire world and the rest of us are just waiting around. That's not helpful for us to build a new world together. That's actually just replicating and reproducing the world we have now. So that was the idea behind visionary fiction. I was lucky enough to meet Adrian, who has been doing incredible work around Octavia Butler, using Octavia Butler's novels to do strategy sessions for movement organizations. What are the lessons we can pull from Octavia Butler for the work that we're doing on the ground in communities every day, which I was like, you're kind of the most amazing person ever, Adrian, and we are going to do a project together. So that's kind of how Octavia's Brood came together in the beginning, and how we both sort of brought the different ways that we were engaging around visionary fiction together.
Amazing. I want to pause for just a second because we have, it looks like, a couple of people who've popped on. So, hey, welcome. I have opened the little chat area on the side. Walidah, do you see that on your screen?
Yeah.
Great. So anybody who wants to ask a question, you can go ahead and start a queue. That's great. We're just going to jam for probably about 10 more minutes or so. Me and Walidah, I want to ask her some more questions before you guys jump in. But yeah, I mean, feel free to ask any sort of burning questions of me or of Walidah. So I want to ask you, Walidah, how you feel like your exposure to sci-fi as a kid. You said you've been a nerd your whole life, so I'm wondering how you feel like. Oh, hi. Hello. Oh, we lost somebody. Okay, so somebody popped on and then they left. I'm wondering how your experiences with sci-fi sort of shaped you. How do you feel like they've influenced you? You know, you were into Star Trek, for instance. So, do you feel like your exposure to that opened you up in ways that maybe you wouldn't have been? I guess I'm asking because I also grew up. My mom's a Trekkie. You know, I grew up. Not necessarily watching Star Trek, but just with it on in the house, and it always, I think it just kind of got into my skin and my consciousness and the way that I thought about what was possible for myself and what was possible for the world. And I guess what I'm getting at really is the power of visionary fiction and the power of sci-fi, and I think just the power of narrative in general. And the narratives that we're exposed to, and the ones that are constructed for us, and the ones that we construct for ourselves. So I just wanted you to kind of speak more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that science fiction, you know, and Adrian and I feel that science fiction is uniquely positioned to allow us to, you know, to build these new worlds, because it's the only genre where we're not constrained by this, right? There are no limits. We're not, the goal is actually to go beyond what's realistic, right? And in fact, to engage with the impossible. And I think that that's incredibly important for organizers, because every significant social movement and change and justice movement that's happened, they've been told that that change was impossible, right? They were told it was unrealistic. So, you know, the civil rights era and the end of segregation, folks were told that's unrealistic to think that legal segregation will ever end. You're asking for the impossible. You're asking for some dream. And they said, then we're going to dream, and we're going to pull that dream down from the heavens, and we're going to make it our reality. And so I think one of the things that's incredibly useful is that it allows us to really move outside of the constraints of realistic, because what is realistic is often piecemeal reform, right? It's nothing, it's surface, superficial changes is what we're offered as realistic. And the actual deep transformative changes are what's absolutely unrealistic and impossible. So I think that science fiction absolutely creates a space for us to be able to do that. Now, it doesn't, you know, it's not always used for that. It's mostly not used for that in the mainstream. It's mostly used to say the future will basically be like the present. Like, you know, white hegemony will continue forever, y'all. Get ready. And And that's why I think it's important to have visionary fiction that says, that's actually not true. This doesn't have to continue. Ursula K. Le Guin, who's an incredible sci-fi writer who everyone should read and love. Her book, The Dispossessed, is incredible. She spoke at the National Book Awards just recently, like a few weeks ago, and she said, she was like, we're told that there is no other option than capitalism, that capitalism will continue forever. She's like, people were told that the divine right of kings would continue forever, and there were no other options. And the minute that people were able to dream something other than the divine right of kings is when that, that idea that it was unrealistic ended, right? And so I think that that's really important when we think about social change, because we often can't imagine something different than what's here, but a space that allows us to imagine aliens and other worlds and time travels to the past and, all of these fantastical things allow us to step outside of that realm of what has really been beaten into us, right? These boundaries that have been beaten into us. And I think being able to step into a place where we're like, well, we've thrown out all of those rules. Like, there are blue people here, so obviously what's realistic no longer applies, actually creates a space where people can open up wide and stop saying, well, what's realistic, and start saying, what do we want?
Yeah. So you just hit on something else that I really want to touch on, which is this whole idea of
I think it would be good maybe for people who are listening to mute your mic. Just maybe you could write that on the side too.
Yeah. I got it muted. Yeah, I got it. So what I was going to ask is, you just hit on something about having these boundaries, being beat into us, and I'm wondering what has been your personal process in breaking those boundaries down. I know for me, it's been a lot of, I would say, purging, and really like through my writing, through my artistic expression, I've really, I think, gone deeply into my identity, the identity that has been assigned to me because of the way that I look, and sort of the body that I inhabit. And I've, through my writing, been able to really process through that and find, I think, a deeper truth of myself. So that's been my personal sort of way, I think, that I've been decolonizing, and it's a continual process. But I'm wondering for you, what that's looked like.
Yeah, I think it's great that you talk about it being a process, because I think that's what we're offering with visionary fiction. To us, visionary fiction isn't an end; it's a process, right? It's a tool, it's a mechanism for us to begin to all collectively dream together and then begin to build those futures. I think, like you said, there are as many different ways to enter into that process as there are human beings who want to do it, right? Or any beings, Maybe there are folks on other planets engaged in a decolonization, anti-oppression process right now, and like I stand in solidarity with y'all. So, so I think, for me, I'm a poet as well, as someone who writes science fiction and does this work. So that piece of poetry has been incredibly important to me, and I think that that idea of challenging what's realistic also to me came out through poetry, came out through especially poetry from the Black arts movement, came out through Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and Amiri Baraka and the New Yorican poets and Miguel Pinheiro and June Jordan and Audre Lorde and all of these poets who in their writing, really challenge the boundaries of what's realistic, right? And really pull together these different pieces that we're told don't go together, but they pull them together to show total liberation through poetry. And so I think that, science fiction and visionary fiction is one process that can be utilized, and they can all be, combined together and Frankensteined into, into a new awesome entity. I'm actually writing a collection right now of science fiction poetry, so trying to just pull all these pieces of myself together.
Wow.
But I think that for me that the sci-fi has really been important. I think that many of the moments that I've had where I say, wow, things don't have to be like this, have come to me through science fiction. That's just what I've related to. And when I'm actually trying to remind myself of different frameworks, I in fact think of science fiction. So, I think of Marge Piercy's book, Woman on the Edge of Time, which, was kind of the first book that I read that, there were many things about it that were different, but in it was the first book that I ever read that had gender-neutral pronouns. Everyone said per instead of his or her, right? Short for person. And I read it in high school. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Why is everyone not doing this? And at that point, I didn't really have a lot of consciousness around, I recognize gender and sexism, but I didn't have a complex understanding of, like, let's break gender binaries and that, there are many different genders as there are people in the world. But, like, seeing that in print and seeing the society where it was just an everyday occurrance blew my mind and really began having me ask questions I had never even known to ask before. I think, Nnedi Okorafor's book Akata Witch, which is actually, and we talked about this, it's our thing now.
I still haven't read it. It's on my list, though.
Yay. I feel like, the framework that she provides in this, and it's a young adult book, and I hope every kid, but especially every kid of color, reads this book. That's what I would love. I think adults should read it, but I would love for youth of color to read it because it says that actually the defects that you have are actually your greatest strength, and that the people who have the most magic in this society are the folks who are deemed the most defective, right? And they're the leopard people, they're the magic people, and the people without magic are lambs. And so I definitely have been in moments where, I'm like, I feel like I'm all by myself here, and you know what? It's okay, because I'm a leopard person. I'm a leopard person. And I think that connected with me in a way, that, speeches and manifestos don't, because I think, like you said, it's the power of narrative, it's the power of stories, it's the power with connecting with something human. And I think that there have been many science fiction books that had more truth to me than any nonfiction book, right? Nonfiction books had facts, but these science fiction books, especially Octavia Butler's work, so many other people, they had truths, and those are the truths that I hold really close.
Mm-hmm. Good. Wow. Thank you. We've had a few more people jump on, so anybody go ahead and I'll open it up for questions, and we'll just kind of field them as they come in. So feel free to type here on the side in the chat room. And I guess, Walidah, if there are people online or whatever, on Twitter or other mediums who are chiming in, let me know. Okay. Well, let's talk more about Octavia's Brood. So, how did that come about? And we talked about this at the conference, but I'd love for you to share more about where the name comes from and how it's all coming together.
Sure. Yeah, so my co-editor, Adrienne Marie Brown, and I were both, like I said, working on different, strains of kind of radical science fiction. And I edited an edition of Left Turn magazine, which was a national magazine around visionary fiction, and Adrienne wrote a piece for it. And after the U.S. Social Forum that was held in Detroit, I guess that was 2010 now, we were emailing, and she was like, we should work on a project together. I was like, that would be awesome. And she's like, yeah, I'm really busy, so maybe in 6 months to a year. And I was like, oh, it's one of those projects, one of those never going to happen projects. And an hour later, she wrote an email, and I in fact have the email. I was looking at it recently because I was going through her files. She wrote an email an hour later. She was like, fuck it, let's do it now. And I was like, yeah. So that's how Octavia's Brood was born. And for us, the name is in honor of Octavia Butler, who's an incredible Black feminist science fiction writer, MacArthur Genius Award winner, and just someone we feel embodies the principles of visionary fiction, you know, to the core. That her books are always centering those folks who have been marginalized in our society. All of her main characters are, you know, women of color, young folks, aliens, hybrids. You know, they're the people who have been marginalized in the larger society. You know, she shows that change is collective. It's from the bottom up, not the top down. You know, her books are not utopias by any means, but she shows that even though things are hard and even though things can get way worse and probably will, we can still change that, and we can still build amongst the rubble this new society. So we don't have to despair, like there's, you know, oh, that's the end, that there's always opportunities as long as we hold these principles. So to us, we wanted to honor her, so we named ourselves Octavia's Brood, and also in honor of her collection of books, Lilith's Brood. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we also think that that term, Octavia's Brood, you know, we're the children, and I think Lilith's Brood is a great example, because in that series of books, aliens come to Earth, and basically humans have to join with them, merge with them genetically to survive, for both species to survive. And the new hybrids, the new, you know, alien humans that are come out of that are at the same time utterly familiar and completely alien to, you know, their progenitors. They are something that's familiar, and they're also something entirely new. And so I feel like for us, we feel that calling ourselves Octavia's Brood, we don't purport to say that we are carrying it on in the way that she would have carried it on if she was still with us. We just purport to say we have taken some of her genetic material, it's been mixed with our own, and here's something new. And whether or not, you know, we are the brood, whether or not we do it, you know, in the way that those folks before would have, you know, held it up perfectly. Mm-hmm. So in the book we have 20 stories, short stories written by organizers, activists, change makers, and they're incredible. Like the process of doing this has been the most collaborative, interactive editing process I've ever done, and the writers have been so gracious to go back and forth with us. I mean, we didn't have an open call for submissions because the people we wanted we knew would never answer that call, because we wanted folks who didn't write science fiction, by and large. So the majority of folks in the anthology have never written science fiction. Most of them have never written fiction before. And so, you know, when we reached out to them, they were like, I think you sent this email to the wrong person. That's not me. And we're like, no, we mean you. And folks were really hesitant, and we asked them to just sit with it. And overwhelmingly, when we went back to folks, they had written whole new worlds already in a few weeks. Because we do this every day as organizers, right? All organizing is science fiction. And so I think that folks just need a little bit of an outlet to let it out.
I think it's so smart that you went to people who hadn't written science fiction, because it's a way of centering their voices in the middle of something that is still, you know, very largely just white men sort of perpetuating the same world over and over again in different times, you know. So Middle Earth looks exactly the same as 3,000 years from now, and voices of color and disabled people and you know, trans people and all of these different ways of seeing the world are able to bring something into the genre that perhaps other people just aren't able to do because they don't see the world. They're just not seeing the world that way. So I think it's really amazing that you guys went to people who specifically didn't write science fiction and were like, yes, you boo, you're going to do this. So that's amazing. I want to ask you this. Do you feel like, with everything that's been going on, obviously, you know, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, all of these recent events, protests around them and around other horrible things that are going on, do you feel like we're starting to live science fiction?
I think, I definitely feel that way. I mean, I feel like we've been living science fiction for a long time. In fact, my friends know that I just blurt out, "We're living in the future" sometimes when we see.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Can you say?
Because I feel like a lot of these things that we say are science fiction are here, right? They may not be as widely known and used as in these films, but I mean, they're here. Like cars that drive themselves are here, and they're legal in like 11 states. I'm like, there are cars on the road driving themselves right now. Like this is not the future. This is the now, right? And in fact, I feel like, I mean, I've been working on this story about time travel and alternate parallel universes, and so I've been trying to read about quantum physics and string theory, and I've realized how much public schools failed me around that. I was like, wow, I really got no science education for this. But I mean, I think so many of the things were like, oh, this is just science fiction, is actually physicists and some of the most well-respected scientists in the entire world are like, no, that's true. Like, yeah, parallel universes, totally. Quantum theory, it's real, y'all. Like, that's our best guess right now, which is really all science ever is, right? Is a best guess. But I just think that there are so many things that we think of as science fiction that live with us every day. And so I think it's really important for us to start thinking like that, especially as social justice movements, because I think oftentimes we are looking backwards, right? We're looking oftentimes to the 60s and the 70s and the 50s as our template for how to engage in social change and how to engage in radical politics, when, I mean, the system, the state, is looking forward, right? They're pulling the future into the present and utilizing that against us. So, Adrian and I also talk about that this is incredibly important to think about tactically. How are we going to deal with some of these changes that are here and they're not completely widespread yet, but how do we begin to think about that, right? Because there was a point when cell phones were starting, right? And I'm sure that there were organizers who were like, oh, this is terrible. It's like Star Trek. This is going to be used as a tool of oppression, cell phones. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And they're here. They're going to be everywhere. So we need to be brainstorming and thinking, well, how can we utilize that? And so I think science fiction is a great genre and way for social justice organizations to say, well, what are the technologies that are going to be affecting our work in 10, 20, 50 years, and how do we begin to brainstorm about not getting bulldozed by them, but actually how do we utilize that to move our movements forward?
And I would add to that, how do we actually become a part of creating them? I mean, why we can create those technologies. We can empower ourselves to have control over the technological future, and as well as the future at large. I mean, it belongs to us as much as it belongs to everyone else. And Jason asked a while ago, I didn't see it, sorry Jason, but he asked what the name of the book was again with the gender neutral pronouns.
Oh, it's Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time.
Okay, so you got that, Jason, like, put your thumb up or something. Good, awesome. So I just had another question and then I lost it. I lost the question. That's okay. So
I mean, I think, also one other, and I think we talked about this a lot when we were at the conference.
I was going back to like, what did because we talked about so many things that day.
Yeah. So. I know, I was like, oh my God, blah. But, I think in terms of that, like, technology, like, yes, like, creating our own technology, but I also think then thinking about how do we subvert the technology that's either coming from the system and oppressive structures or is going to be co-opted by them, right? Because, I mean, that's the reality, is that anything that comes down, the system will try to use it for its own oppressive purposes. So, yes, we need to be visionary, but I think another part of what we're doing is about how do we subvert you know, what already exists. And so one of our writers, Morgan Phillips, has actually created this really amazing workshop around science fiction and direct action tactics. And it's about choosing an existing sci-fi fantasy world, so Hogwarts or the Death Star or Oz, and then picking that you're the most oppressed people within that, figuring out what your end goal is, and then developing strategies towards achieving that goal. And it's amazing. It's the most fun workshop that has ever happened in the history of this universe or any other. It's a little exaggeration, but only a little bit. Because it's so incredible to see people, and people get to choose which, you know, where they want to go. And so they're picking these worlds that they have invested so much time into, and really being able to, in many ways, talk back to them, right? And to, you know, to change them and to bring themselves fully into it, you know? And I think that that's an incredibly powerful thing, because I love Star Trek. You know, I've invested, I cannot even begin to imagine how many hours and years of my life have been spent just watching Star Trek. But, you know, I have incredibly deep concerns and critiques with the Star Trek framework. I think that it's, you know, it's an incredibly, you know, colonial framework, and that oftentimes they end up replicating a lot of the oppressive narratives that I would like to do away with. So being able to say, actually, okay, now I'm in the Star Trek world, I know the rules, but I'm gonna subvert it from the inside, is incredibly powerful. The last time we did it, there was a group that did the Hunger Games, which I thought was amazing, because the Hunger Games were so hopeful in terms of actually being able to present some sort of transformative vision. Yeah. And then, you know, Mockingjay was just like, you know, that's just not to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read the books, but shit is gonna get terrible soon, y'all. You know, and I feel like at the end, what happened is the same thing that always happens, is you know, just basically, you know, we're back to status quo. Oh, you know, rebellion doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it'll just be the same thing it is, because that's what humans do, so why even bother, basically. And it really, what it does is it allows us a rebellious outlet while reinforcing, you know, the hegemony of the system. And so that group was like, we love Hunger Games, and we're going to make it the way it should have been. And it was amazing. And they, you know, they were basically like blowing up the border checkpoints between the different districts with like flour bombs, because they were, you know, from the bread, the one that Rue's from, the ones that have the grain in the bread. I forget which district that is. I know someone knows. You could write it up. But
isn't it a high number?
Yeah, it's one of the high numbers. I forgot.
Sorry, everybody. Anyway. A little going on. Yeah. Okay. So I'm interested. I like this, and we did this a little bit when we were talking after the conference, critiquing the sort of mainstream sci-fi that's out there, and I had a real issue with Exodus, which isn't really sci-fi, but more, it's supposed to be historical, but you know,
it's science fiction that Exodus is peopled by white folks. I'm like, so that's made it science fiction.
Apparently, in Africa, there are just no black folks. So it is sci-fi in a sense.
Other black people were just the slaves. Then the white people run everything. I was like, yeah.
Right. So, I'm interested in what you said about Hunger Games. You know, reinforcing, failing to essentially imagine a new world. It fails to do that, and I think that it's important. I want to say this for any of the artists or creative people who are watching, that it's important. It's so imperative that we push ourselves to imagine past the current paradigm, to to continue writing until you're writing something that you don't know the outcome of. I think that, you know, sometimes we stop ourselves creatively when we're just, we don't know where things are going to end up. And I think that it's just important to know that continuing to write or continuing to, push past that in whatever medium that is for you. It could be painting, it could be sculpting. It's about breaking past something that you know about and going into unknown territory, which is scary and vulnerable and all of these things. But I think it's what's required of us as creative people and also as people who are living in this time. We need that. It's, I just want to harp on how necessary it is to imagine. It isn't a luxury. And that was something that from your talk, Walidah, I just, at the end, I was like clapping, I was like praise dancing, I was up on my feet, and the women in front of me thought I was nuts. They were law students, so I know they were like, what is she doing? But I was like, woo, hallelujah, because your talk was really about that. It wasn't just a challenge to the system and those oppressors who are part of it, but also a challenge to us as people who are historically oppressed, as people who are agents of our own destiny. And you really, I think, got to the heart of things, which is to push ourselves to really do the work that's required, and that we owe it to the people who dreamed us to now dream a new world. So
absolutely.
I'm glad I got that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's a glorious responsibility, right? It's a right, it's a privilege to be part of this lineage of dreaming. I mean, that's, Adrian and I talk about this all the time, and we think that, anyone coming from historically oppressed groups, we're all walking science fiction, We were dreamed up. We were created in a world that people couldn't imagine us existing as we do today, and they bent the world and reshaped it to make us. Adrian and I are both Black women, and so we think about enslaved Black folks, and we think about enslaved Black folks dreaming of freedom, and we think about enslaved Black folks being told that that's absolutely unrealistic and impossible and will never happen. And we think about enslaved Black folks saying, I can see this vision that you're telling me is impossible, and I will do whatever is necessary to bring it into existence. And they did. They made us, they sculpted us from dreams. And so we absolutely have a responsibility, a right, and a privilege to honor that, to see ourselves as connected to that, and to continue moving it forward, and to be as visionary and say, we have a responsibility to dream the impossible and then to make it happen, so that those folks in 100 years will look back on us. They won't know our names, but they'll say, wow, can you imagine that every 28 hours an unarmed Black person was being shot in the street by police and by white armed vigilantes? Can you imagine that? And can you imagine that the system only told them that there was only reform possible, that they could get cops with cameras, or they could get civilian oversight boards that had no power? And do you know what those people said? They said absolutely not. And then they created these communities that don't have police, that focus on community-based alternatives. And that's what they're going to be saying in the future if we take that charge that's ours, right? But if we don't, then in the future they're going to be saying, can you believe that every 12 hours an unarmed Black person, can you believe that every 10 minutes an unarmed Black person is killed by police and those who are supported by law enforcement, right? So it's really incumbent upon us to say we can accept these reforms and basically condemn our future to living the same exact reality, or we can take up that scary charge, as you're saying, that terrifying charge of saying, we're out here, y'all. We're boldly going where no one's gone before. Like what is out here and what can we build? But that is the only way that we're going to create the worlds that we long to see.
Yeah. In that, I've been thinking about the need in this time for visionaries, the need for that as a part of activism, and that it doesn't mean that there shouldn't also be people who it's both. It's dealing with things as they are, but it's also about seeing how things could be in a completely new way. And um, I imagine think tanks, and I imagine more anthologies of science fiction and more art and more things that show us a new way, because people need that. They need to see, you know, there's a saying like you can't be what you can't see, and people need to see, and therefore there need to be visionaries, people who are gifted with that to create those things in order for people to follow. I guess, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I also feel like, I mean, I feel like every single person has visionary inside of them, and just has to be brave
Yeah,
enough to let it out, and to
yeah.
step outside of the boundaries of what we know into the unknown. And I absolutely am not saying that, that um, reforms can't be part of a larger visionary abolitionist process, but it has to be within that larger abolitionist framework, right? I mean, ending legal segregation during the civil rights movement for, the organizers, whether or not it was for the people on the ground, the organizers, that was not a goal. That was a tactic, right? The goal was freedom, right? Like the civil rights movement, the goal was freedom for black folks.
Hmm.
Ending legal segregation, they felt like, was a way to expose the contradictions of the system to such a heightened space that folks would be able to rally around it and build energy and push for that freedom. It was a step. It wasn't the end. And so I think we have to think of those changes as that, because if we think of it as the end, then people say, well, nothing changed, right? I mean, this nation is actually more segregated today than it was before Brown versus the Board of Education ending
Really?
segregation in public accommodations, right? Yeah,
Is
it's more segregated today.
wow.
So, but that's, I'm like, that's only important if that was your end goal. But if the end goal was freedom, then we got a lot out of that movement. We learned a lot of important lessons. We built a lot of tools. We were able to activate a lot of incredible leaders and organizers who continue to move that forward, right? So for me, I think it's incredibly important. I do work around prisons. I believe I'm a prison abolitionist. I believe there should be no prisons. So I also, my adopted brother is incarcerated in California. I have people that I love with all my heart in prison, and I want them to live long enough to make it out of those gates. So I absolutely believe that reforms have to be made to make those conditions as livable as possible while we are moving towards revolution, while we are moving towards this new, vision. But we have to be moving towards that vision. I teach a class on the history of the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party, a lot of people know their free breakfast programs, their healthcare clinics. So those programs, all of their programs, and they actually had like 120 different community service programs. They were part of their programs called Survival Pending Revolution programs, right? They said our goal is revolution, but we know people have to survive till then. People have to eat, people have to get clothing, people have to have health care. So we are creating survival pending revolution programs to show the community that they can address their own needs and keep them alive and healthy enough that we can continue to move towards revolution. I think that's an incredibly visionary framework that the Black Panthers were using, right? And I think that that was them dreaming these new futures and saying, well, we want revolution. How do we begin to move the steps to get there? Which is what we want folks to do, in this science fiction process.
Yeah. So I want to close by asking you um, what your vision is. You shared a little bit, you're a prison abolitionist, so you would like a world with no prisons. What else do you see for the world?
I mean, I feel like that's a huge thing, and I feel like my vision is fluid, because I feel like I do want to create that vision in community, right? Like I want to collectively dream with other people. I think me just being like, well, this is my vision, often means that you get stuck in that vision, and like anything new that comes along, you're like, that doesn't fit into my vision, right? And then you're either, you know, completely alone, or you're a dictator, and neither of those are very visionary. And so, you know, for me, the end goal is creating a world where everyone has the resources in every way, right? Not just material, but mental, emotional, you know, soul resources, heart resources they need to be the people that they want to be, right? And to me, that's the whole point of what we're doing. And that's why we have to tear down oppressive systems. And that's why we have to, you know, destroy these inequalities that have shaped this nation and this world, is to create space for everyone to have what they need to be the people that they want to be. And I want to, you know, I want to be in that process with other people. And so I'm really excited that we did this Google Hangout, and that folks are, you know, coming and, you know, hearing and participating. And I just invite people to dream collectively with us, you know, to engage with Octavia's Brood itself, but also to engage everywhere you go. I mean, my dream is that every organizing meeting will have a visionary section where people say, okay, well, in 100 years, what do we want this issue to look like, right? I want folks to be engaging and writing those stories together. And I think that, you know, we can do that everywhere we are, and everyone has a piece of that dream. We all dream, right? No one's dream is better than anyone else's dream. And when we combine it, we literally can change not just the world, not just the universe, but the multiverse.
Oh, you have been reading.
Thank you, Stephen Hawking.
The multiverse. Oh my God. That's such a good way to end. I want to thank you for your work, for Octavia's Brood, for your voice, you know, as an individual, but also and Adrian are doing, and just thank you. And I'm really excited for April 1st when Octavia's Brood hits the shelves. And then you guys are going to be doing a tour. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a national tour. So folks can check that out.
So we'll look for details about that. And what's the best way for people to find you, to keep in touch with you, to just keep up with what's going on?
Octavia. We're on Twitter, Facebook. We're on all that stuff.
Okay. All right.
All that sci-fi stuff.
Good. Yay. Well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, this is so great. As soon as you spoke at the conference, I was like, I need to talk to her.
What was awesome?
Yes, exactly. I'm Jillian Walker. You can find me at thisisjillianwalker.com. Pretty simple. And all of my social media connections and contacts are there. Thank you to the viewers who've joined us. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. I don't see any questions that I missed or anything else coming in, so we will end there. Have a good night. Well, it's not even nighttime there, is it? Is it still
right now?
Is the sun still out over there?
Barely. It's also never out.
Oh, because it rains a lot. Okay. Well, it's pretty dark here in New York. But thank you so much, Walidah.
Thank you, ladies. This was great.
Oh, you're welcome. Is that Jason?
Yep.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You watched.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody who's listening, thanks so much. Bye. Oh, is it still on?